He saw the cultural and social backwardness in the Champaran villages and wanted to do something about it. Immediately, he appealed for teachers Mahadev Desai and Narhari Parikh, two young men who had just joined Gandhi as disciples, and their wives volunteered for the work. Several more came from Bombay, Pune, and other parts of the land. Devdas, Gandhi's youngest son, arrived from the ashram, and so did Mrs. Gandhi. Primary schools were opened in 6 villages. Kasturba taught the ashram rules on personal cleanliness and community sanitation. Health conditions were miserable. Gandhi got a doctor to volunteer his services for 6 months. 3 medicines were available: castor oil, quinine, and sulfur ointment. Anybody who sewed a coated tongue was given a dose of castor oil. Anybody with malaria fever received quinine plus castor oil. Anybody with skin eruption received ointment plus castor oil. Gandhi noticed the filthy state of women's clothes. He asked Kasturba to talk to them about it. One woman took Kasturba into her hut and said, "Look, there is no box or cupboard here for clothes. The sari I am wearing is the only one I have." During his long stay in Champaran, Gandhi kept a long-distance watch on the ashram. He sent regular instruction by mail and asked the financial accounts. Once he wrote to the residents that it was time to fill in the old little trenches and dig new ones, otherwise the old ones would begin to smell back. So Gandhiji, he not only fought for the justice of the peasants by helping in the abolition of the coercive indigo farming in Champaran, but he also worked a lot upon the cultural and social upliftment of the Champaran villages. So as he understood that illiteracy was one of the most important reasons as to why the Europeans could dominate or exploit the peasants, he decided to educate the peasants with the help of volunteers. He appealed for teachers. So two young pupils, Mahadev Desai and Narhari Parikh, and their wives, they volunteered to work as teachers in Champaran. Several more teachers came from Bombay, Pune, and other districts of India. And then primary schools were also opened in 6 villages. Then, as Gandhiji gave utmost priority to personal cleanliness and community sanitation, as these things are important for personal well-being or a healthy environment. Therefore, Gandhiji's wife Kasturba taught the ashram rules on personal cleanliness and community sanitation to the people. In order to improve the miserable health condition, Gandhiji got the services of a doctor who worked for 6 months. Now, 3 medicines were prescribed for every disease. So, anyone who had coated tongues, they would be given castor oil. Then malaria fever patients would receive quinine plus castor oil, and those with skin eruption would receive ointment plus castor oil. But at the same time, Gandhiji also kept a long distance watch on the ashram of Ahmedabad. Gives instructions to the ashram from time to time. And Gandhiji also told Kasturba Gandhi to talk to the women to get rid of their filthy state of clothes. But unfortunately, they came to know that these people were so poor, they didn't have another set of clothes. So the women, the sari that they used to wear was the only set of clothes that they had. And during this long stay at Champaran, Gandhiji taught people self-reliance, freedom from the fear of the British, self-sufficiency, which were very important to build a free modern Indian who could fight for his rights. The Champaran episode was a turning point in Gandhi's life. What I did, he explained, was a very ordinary thing. I declared that the British could not order me about in my own country. But Champaran didn't begin as an act of defiance. It grew out of an attempt to alleviate the distress of large number of poor peasants. This was the typical Gandhi pattern. His politics were intertwined with the practical day-to-day problems of the millions. His was not a loyalty to abstractions, it was a loyalty to living human beings. In everything Gandhi did, moreover, he tried to mold a new free Indian who could stand on his own feet and thus make India free. So the Champaran Satyagraha, in Gandhiji's opinion, was the turning point in his life, because while fighting for the rights of the Champaran peasants, or while helping in the abolition of the coercive indigo farming in Champaran, Gandhiji also helped the peasants of Champaran to be free from their fear, to be courageous, to be self-dependent or self-sufficient. So in that way, he was able to create a courageous and rebellious India. And later on, when he jumped into the freedom movement of the country, he got the support of these millions of fearless and courageous Indians, which were actually built up. These Indians, these courageous and fearless Indians, were built up during the Samparan Satyagraha. So all this helped him in his fight against the British later on. So therefore it was a turning point in his life. And now a very interesting concept about Gandhi's politics is being said. Like, every person has his own way of politics, and Gandhi's politics was not like the other leaders of his time. Though the other leaders, they mainly believed in lofty ideals, so they believed in abstract concepts, but Gandhi's politics was intertwined with the everyday problems faced by the millions of people in India. So unlike his when he first came to Champaran, his main motive was not to make the Indians free from the clutches of the Britishers. His main intention was to get justice for the poor peasants of Champaran, or was to help them in getting the compensation money back. But while fighting for these peasants in a non-violent way, or by following the concepts of civil disobedience, non-violence, Gandhiji understood that if he could make these people free from their fear, if he could make them self-sufficient, or if he could work on their cultural and social upliftment, then, if he could make them get out of their prejudices, then he would be able to make a free Indian who could fight for his rights, and who could later on help him in his fight against the Britishers. So in that way, Gandhiji's politics was knitted up with the everyday problems faced by the millions of people in India. So unlike the other leaders, they always used to believe in lofty ideals. They wanted independence or freedom all of a sudden. But Gandhiji's politics was not of that sort. His politics was grounded in reality. His main intention was to mix up politics with day-to-day problems faced by the millions of people. Early in the Samparan action, Charles Freer Andrews, the English pacifist who had become a devoted follower of the Mahatma, came to bid Gandhi farewell before going on a tour of duty to the Fiji Islands. Gandhi's lawyer friends thought it would be a good idea for Andrews to stay in Champaran and help them. Andrews was willing if Gandhi agreed, but Gandhi was vehemently opposed. He said, "You think that in this unequal fight it would be helpful if we have an Englishman on our side? This shows the weakness of our heart. The cause is just, and you must rely upon yourself to win the battle. You should not seek a prop in Mr. Andrews because he happens to be an Englishman. He had read our minds correctly." Ranjit Prasad comments, and we had no reply. Gandhi in this way taught us a lesson in self-reliance. Self-reliance, Indian independence, and help to the sharecroppers were all bound together. So Charles Freer Andrews was a peacemaker or a pacifist who was a great admirer of Mahatma Gandhi, and before going to Fiji Islands, he visited Gandhiji in Champaran. And the lawyers, they advised Gandhi that Charles Andrews could stay there to help them in uplifting or in relieving the miseries of the poor peasants, or in helping in their social or cultural upliftment. But Gandhiji refused. He believed that they didn't need the help of the Britishers because they had trust in their own abilities, and if they get help from an Englishman like Andrews, then it would show their own weakness, or it would show that they lack in abilities. It would show that the newly learned lesson of self-reliance was of no use, because they had newly learned about self-reliance, and if they took the help of an Englishman or a Britisher like Charles Andrews, then this self-reliance was of no use because they are taking the help of a Britisher. So in that way, Gandhiji taught the lesson of self-sufficiency or self-reliance to the people of Champaran, to the lawyers. And finally, it is said that self-reliance, the freedom movement, and the help to the sharecroppers were all bound together. So everything was bound together in Gandhian politics.